Well, hurrah and huzzah. Here we are at the end of 1.3. And oh, goodness me, I've got the wrong definition in here of technical textiles. To be honest, technical textiles doesn't really need a written definition like, say, composites do. But basically, technical textiles are, yeah, textiles developed to have specific high performance properties. Might be a way of describing what technical textiles are. It's better explained through examples. So the first one, E-Textiles. Think of this as textiles that can actually conduct electrical current. So a good example is fencing uniform, or I don't know what they call it in fencing, but let's call it uniform. Fencing uniform. So the whole way that, and I do apologize for my ignorance if you are a fencer or if you have done fencing. I never have. I'm only working from my very ignorant point of view, but from what I understand from fencing is the way that the point scoring is registered is by the swords touching the opponent's suit, and that makes a circuit. And so then that literally digitally makes a mark and it scores a point. So then it'll be tallied up. And that happens because they're essentially the suits and the swords are connected in one very low current circuit loop. So when you touch the opponent's suit, it will then make a circuit. And that's why you see this wiring going out of the back. And to be honest, I think the reason they have this is because the strikes of the sword are so subtle and can be so small that they are almost impossible to see by the human eye. Like the only way to register them is by having is using like electrical current to actually register the marks. Yeah. So e-textiles, that's an example, but e-textiles can also be used for all sorts of other things. It's slightly in the realm of gimmicky kind of like future materials because no one, again, there's not really any decent applications of it yet, but um I mean, one day, I mean, there'll be this will become more prevalent, but it's basically building electronics into a fabric is, or having a fabric's ability to be able to conduct electricity is that like there might be an advantage of that at some point. Just needs someone to innovate something that would be good at doing that. Next one is Kevlar. Kevlar's I mean, I've mentioned this a few times. Kevlar's a pretty cool material because the superpower. In fact, actually, superpower is a good way of thinking about this. But Kevlar's superpower is its tensile strength. It's like crazy strong, and it is an artificially created material. So unlike silk, that is a naturally occurring material, which is also insanely strong in terms of tensile strength, Kevlar is artificial. So um, one strand of Kevlar is very strong. Now, multiple strands of Kevlar all woven together. So weaving means interlinking fibers. You've suddenly got like a ridiculously strong and high tensile strength piece of material. So with this comes all sorts of benefits. Kevlar can be used for loads of things, from like I mean, even like rock climbing ropes. It could be used for slings for carrying like incredibly heavy. Like we're talking ridiculously heavy stuff. Like if you, I don't know, I'm just thinking of a random example here, but if you had, say, a crane that was lifting up something like a boat out of the water, like a really big boat out of the water, and you obviously don't want to use chains because it'll scratch the hull of the boat. So you need something soft and very flexible. So Kevlar is a good example there because it's so strong it can easily withstand the weight of something really heavy like a boat, and then lift it out, not causing any damage. It's also incredibly light, so it can be worn in clothing very easily without any discomfort. It's flexible. You can apply zippers to it or Velcro or whatever. So a common application that people think of with Kevlar is either stab vests or sort of low ballistic bulletproof vest. So I say low ballistic because it means it's kind of like it's more so was lower power bullets, not armor piercing ones. But and again, the reason for this is that Kevlar can deform. I mean, I've got a sort of mesh of copper here, but if you imagine this as a sort of visual representation, is the bullet will hit the Kevlar and it will deform it, but the Kevlar will never actually break. The strands are so strong that they won't break unless it's obviously a really high power round that's being fired. And it's exactly the same for being resilient to stabbing. Like even though the point of the knife can exert a huge amount of pressure, it the Kevlar's tensile strength is so strong that it's actually then even a sharp knife can't pull apart the fibers. So Yeah, and then another great property of Kevlar is it's also fire retardant. So that means it's incombustible. It can't catch fire, and it won't melt either. So this is why I put a picture of firefighters here, because their suits are actually made of Kevlar. So they can literally walk through flames, and not only will the Kevlar insulate them from the flames, but it will also protect them as well, so they don't actually suffer burns. So it's used for all sorts of things. Do your own research and find out what Kevlar is used for. But yeah, I mean, in terms of going back to the body armor example, I mean, it's great for, say, if you're I don't know, someone who is sort of a high value target or something like that, like you're a president or some bigwig like a business person. Um, Kevlar is great because you can have a very, very thin vest of it, which you can wear underneath, say, a shirt or a suit or a jacket or something. And to the untrained eye, it will be pretty much unnoticeable. Yeah, because it's so thin, and it's also very light and very flexible and breathable. And yeah, so it's a bit of a wonder material, really. So moving on, Gore-Tex is another one. Now, I've seen often in exam questions, I've seen a few times a question come up where it says, like, describe the difference in structure of Gore-Tex compared to Kevlar. Now, what Gore-Tex is, the difference here is that Gore-Tex is made, Kevlar is made from weaving fibers together, like interlocking. Like, I mean, imagine that's a zoomed in view there of the copper. Gore-Tex is made by layering, almost like laminating layers together, and each layer has a slightly different property. Now, the key thing with Gore-Tex here is, if you're not familiar with what it is, it's a great material for outdoor application textiles. The reason being is the outer layer is waterproof, but it is also breathable. So if you're, say, if you're climbing in the mountains and it's raining, and it's fairly cold, but when you're climbing an incline, you're getting pretty hot and sweaty. What's great with Gore-Tex is it will still allow your sweat to actually leave the jacket. Your sweat can get out, but it won't let rain in. So essentially, it keeps you drier, and you don't get that horrible, like, really wet, damp feel when you take off your jacket later or something like that, when you finish, and when your whole body is wet, not from rain, just from sweat. So Gore-Tex stops that from happening, particularly if you wear an artificial base layer, like like if you wear sort of another like base layer style fabric, which will also what we call wick up the moisture away. It's kind of like a super combo. So Gore-Tex is great for that, but it's also windproof. So the fibers on the outside are so tightly woven, and with the layering, wind can't penetrate it. And believe me, like, I speak from experience from mountaineering in many, many very cold environments, when the difference between having a Gore-Tex jacket and a non-Gore-Tex jacket is pretty massive. Like, when the wind is really blowing on you, it's really cold. When you have a Gore-Tex jacket on, you actually notice that you just don't feel the cold as much. And so if you combine that with then an artificial base layer and then a warm insulating layer, that's a pretty perfect combo for staying warm, even in very cold, windy environments, and wet, because it keeps you dry as well. So it's a pretty awesome material for outdoor applications. Last one is very simple, just microfibers. So microfibers are interesting because their ability to absorb and hold a lot of moisture, but using incredibly fine fibers. So you can have a very, very thin, fine material, but it will hold a lot of moisture. And so this is why you get these sort of microfiber, very, very quick drying towels that are used for, say, swimming or outdoors or something, or they're good for traveling. Like if you're traveling somewhere and you need to have a towel that can dry very quickly, microfiber is great because you can literally hang it out in the sun, and probably in like 20 minutes it'll dry, or maybe even less than that actually. If it's windy and sunny, it'll dry like maybe even more, like 5 minutes or something. So it's very quick to get rid of moisture. Yeah, so well done, guys. That is it for 1.3.